Hello, everyone.
Hi. The reason we waited to record and this didn't come out on Thursday, whatever day that would have been, the 5th, was because we thought it would have been so weird to have our November podcast be without any election talk or any knowledge of what was going on. So we were like, all right, we gotta wait. We gotta push it back. So that's why you're getting this so late. But now you get to hear all of our election thoughts.
My sphincter is still clenched.
I literally just posted, I was like, it's time for all of us to remove our tongues from the roof of our mouth, unclench our jaw.
Like the size of our teeth, when I tell people to relax their tongue, they're like, how? I'm like, is it touching like the fucking size of your teeth that relax your tongue? No, how am I feeling? So moving was a blessing in disguise because
it distracted you.
I literally moved on the 6th. And so that entire week, I was kind of, we got our keys on
election day, right?
Well, yeah, it was like the morning. Yeah, it was on election day. We closed on the 2nd, but didn't go basically until the day after. So it was really kind of nice because I really engaged on Tuesday night. I told myself I was not going to just sit and stare at CNN, but I didn't really do that. So I went to bed sobbing, crying on Tuesday. Not because it wasn't like I was like a hopeless, like it's over. Like I wasn't crying for Biden. I was literally crying for the country because I had this moment of, I never was the person that was like, it's going to be a landslide, but this shows how deep things can run. I probably subconsciously hoped for it. Right.
Right. Of course. Like I actually did think it was going to be a landslide. I was like, oh, Ben kept telling me like the polls. And then when the polls were so fucking wrong again, Ben was like,
right. And so that's for me. I'm like, I mean, Hillary, I guess, was like the only election I can remember where I was so mortified, like
distraught.
Right. And just like scarred for life. So I've been a little bit gun shy of the polls since, like, that's why I kind of like, I was like, set no expectations for yourself. Or if you do, set the expectation that Trump is going to win again. But I think so deep in my subconscious, I was hoping that the world was better. I mean, there's so much has happened this year, right? Like so many reckonings, people coming together and fighting hate in so many different ways that I was like, okay, this is it. This is the time. Like this has to be like everyone, like more people are going to come out of the woodwork, and whether or not they want to say, you know, they're voting for Biden, if they're a previous Trump supporter, like there's got to be people that like feel this. Right. And I think on Tuesday, I like get goosebumps thinking about it, but I think on Tuesday I was just like, fuck. The country, there's so much hate in this world, in this country, so much hate. And I had this moment of, you know, not that I'm not proud to be American, but everything this country stands for underneath this current administration is not what I stand for. And how much longer as a person can you live in this world? And I don't want to be the person that's like, I'm going to move to Canada. But like, part of me is like, I don't want to raise my children in a world that I can't be like, I respect my leaders. And so I had just had this moment, and I think you said it so well. The fact that people looked at the last 4 years and were like, oh yeah, more of that.
Right. I'm signing up for 4 more years of this. Like, especially the last year with COVID, it's just like, how are you like, this makes sense. This was the right direction we should have taken the country.
Look, I don't think that someone who is voting in this election on a single issue is someone necessarily that I think is a wonderful person. Do I think a good person is concerned with more than themselves? Yes. So to me, definitionally, someone who's literally voting, especially on something like the economy amidst everything that's been going on.
Right.
Like that just, I can't like, okay.
When we were watching the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris speech, I was crying when Kamala Harris was speaking, like, regardless of what you think, and obviously I think great things, but like, regardless of what you think, you have to recognize the moment, like the first woman vice president, the first Black vice president, the first South Asian vice president.
Yeah.
And you just have to recognize the gravity of that moment. And Ben was just kind of rolling his eyes. And I was like, must be nice to be a straight white dick. like,
so I think I texted you. My mom called me in a literal panic, literal screaming at me, love you, Mom, but you were yelling. She's like, Trump's going to be able to do something. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. And I was like, Mom, and we can talk about this because I know you have like the legal brain, but I was like, Mom, here's the thing. The Supreme Court, if it even gets there, but the Supreme Court is like the reason why the Supreme Court is scary right now is because they're constructionists where they look very literally at the Constitution. Like this, what Trump is doing is not in the, like, that's not, so like, I don't think even if it gets there, I like, don't think that there's any merit. Like, he's like, well, they're all, all the Supreme Court justices are in his pocket. I was like, no, the senators, but whatever. Anyway, so my mom was like literally panicking.
I totally agree. He's filed these suits everywhere that are just getting tossed left and right. The ones in Georgia and Michigan are getting tossed out. One of the ones in Georgia is regarding—
They're getting tossed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are regarding 53 ballots. And it's like, what is the purpose of that?
So here's the thing also that I think people need to realize, which is something I kind of learned recently, is there's a threshold of votes where a recount automatically happens, just to be sure. So like the recounts that are happening in Georgia, for instance, like I don't know are they even Trump ordered or are they just part of the process?
No, the ones in Georgia are mandatory recounts.
Yes. So I'm like, so why are these senators going on and being like, yeah, Georgia recount because of Trump? I'm like, that's just the way it works. Like, correct. What? So like people,
if there's a recount in Wisconsin, then it's Trump ordered and he has to pay for it because it wasn't within the threshold. Because I think it was like over 30,000 votes. Yeah. The reason there was a recount in 2016 was because Jill Stein wanted it. So like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And basically, the former governor of Wisconsin, who's a Republican, Scott Walker, said like, it's impossible to recover that many votes in a recount. Like he said, you're talking hundreds of votes, like not thousands and thousands of votes. Like this is not a close, like it's much closer than we anticipated, but this is not a close election at this point.
No, especially as they keep counting. I mean, Arizona got
if Biden
today.
wins Georgia, which it looks like he's going to, he will have won by the literal exact same electoral votes as Trump won in 2016.
Wow.
The exact same score. So like seeing Trump say, in 2016, like I won by a landslide. This was a major victory. I won by so many votes. To have it flipped and have him lose by the exact same margin that Hillary Clinton lost is like kind of poetic justice. It kind of goes to my try saying that out loud moment of the month, which was basically just watching the results come in and seeing, even though, it's, I don't know if it's at 75 million yet for Biden, but over 70 million people voted for Trump. And like, that is a deeply divided country. For 70 million people to choose hatred, racism. So, I mean, basically it was just sitting with the fact that you have 70 million people and it's hard to parse through like, there is a whole group of people that are, Trump rallies and flags and those kinds of people. And then you have the people who potentially are voting one issue tax brackets that like might not be bad people, or, one issue anti-abortion, like whatever it is. And it's impossible to know because you have 70 million people voting for a racist. It's so hard to look at that number and think we're going in the right direction. The only way we know that we're going in the right direction is that Joe Biden won, in my opinion. Like you still have
but here's the thing. That's on the backs of Black women, Black men, Indigenous women, Indigenous men. Like Arizona, I think I saw a map.
97%.
Yes. So literally, thank you to the Indigenous populations in the US and like once again. So like for me, like similar to your feeling, I was like, how do I feel positive about this when more women came out in support of Trump this time than last time?
More white women. It was 55%.
And I'm like, okay, so Hillary Clinton, there are probably a lot of women that wanted to see a woman president. Okay, but Kamala Harris, no, like she's on this ticket. Like to your point earlier, I feel like it's like we were so focused on everything else that you like lost sight of the gravity of that. But for me, how do I not feel ashamed to be a white woman right now? How do I not have that feeling.
It's
And
really hard.
and I guess you see like Stacey Abrams in Georgia influencing all these people and like registering all these voters. Like that's
what an
amazing.
incredible
So
woman.
maybe that's what needs to be happening. I don't know, but there has to be a reckoning with these white women.
I mean, at this point, where do we go from here? There's still so much work to be done. So, I mean, yeah, we have to make sure that, there is this kind of like stays in the forefront, because obviously the last 4 years made a lot of people, myself included, you included, a lot more political.
Yeah.
And now that Biden is president, it's not like time to just hang.
Yeah, and let's also make being political not a negative thing. Politics are what run our country. It's not a negative thing. Like
right.
But you have to take baby steps. It's not going to happen overnight.
No.
I know we could talk about this for 12,000 years.
Right. And I mean, basically we wanted to make sure that we didn't just touch on it, obviously, but we wanted to make sure we talked about the election and didn't want to like kind of come in here and talk about just, whatever. Before we move on, do you want to do your try saying that out loud moment of the month?
I mean,
I know you don't want to.
I really, I mean, no, it's fine. I think I've really struggled with, and I've struggled with it throughout the pandemic. I think someone said in 1918, or people being called to war, we're being called to our couches during a pandemic. Our lives are not that hard. I have the ability to like order food and DoorDash and whatever, and never have to worry about eating. But I think that the biggest, so Alex and I bought a new house, happened really quickly. We didn't really expect, we thought maybe mid next year we would move, but with the pandemic needing more space, we found this house. It happened really quickly and we're in it. And after being so busy, I like take a step back and I'm like, wow, okay, so like people can't feed their families and I just moved into a like dream house. So how do I reconcile that in my brain?
Right.
And like, how do I feel okay with, and I have to live my life at a certain point. So I don't know, sitting in that was kind of interesting, but I think now I'm like, for instance, we're not going to do Christmas presents. I'm going to donate to food banks. So yeah, but that was a moment.
Do you want to move on to some lighter things?
Let's
some Enneagram and astrology. All right. Let's dive into some astrology. And I know you pulled some listener questions.
Right, I did. So there were a couple of questions, mainly kind of fundamental, like help me understand my natal chart type questions. So one of the first was, what is your rising sign? So your natal chart, to reiterate again, is based upon the date of birth, the time of birth, and the place you were born. And basically it maps out where the planets were the day you were born and the moment you were born. So the rising sign is the planet that was in the eastern horizon on the day you were born.
Interesting. Okay.
And so your rising sign is always in the first house, basically. So your ascendant sign is always in the first house. And it's always the planet that was basically to the east when you were born. So the sun sign is what often people know. And describe it as the core of their personality, kind of like how you express your individuality, the truest expression of yourself. The moon is often your subconscious emotional self. So people might not know these things about you, but like they're things that are kind of run deep inside of you, right? How you deal with emotions. So rising is always in the first house, and the first house is self, body, appearance, vitality. And I'll talk a little bit about that before, but this is why your rising sign's always in the first house, because it kind of governs your physical body. So it's how you come out to the world, like how you're portrayed, like how people see you. Okay. So it's kind of the outward appearance.
External, yeah.
Right. So it really governs who you are, your desires, and how you go about life. So your attitude, demeanor, all of that. So that's basically your rising sign. So actually, often when you're reading your horoscope, it helps to read your rising sign and your sun sign. And sometimes I identify more with my rising sign.
Interesting.
And I've grown a little bit. So I'm a rising Leo. I've grown a little bit into my Aries. I'm like a very intense person. So Aries and Leo are both fire signs. So like, surprise.
Oh, that's a lot.
Right. It's a lot. I'm a lot. I sometimes identify more with my rising. My sun, I've like grown into, which is kind of interesting because your sun really is a lot about your individuality, the truest version of yourself, like kind of like your ultimate destiny in life almost, is like to be that. So often people grow into their sun sign, which I think is true of a lot of
Interesting.
people. Like you read it and you're like, I'm not really identifying. And then it also kind of depends on what house your sun sign is in, and all of these signs are in. Obviously ascendant is different, but what house that is in, basically each house governs an aspect of life. So there are 12 of them, and literally your whole life can be mapped kind of on this chart. And so for me, my sun sign is this like exalted sun, where it's in the ninth. So it governs travel, education, like higher education, astrology, religion, philosophy, kind of like very introspective, deep things. And so
that makes sense.
To me, I'm like, yeah, I've learned this about myself, that I really like learning new things. I'm really into that process. So for me, my Aries qualities show more when I'm doing those things. So like my Aries governs that house.
That makes
sense.
So
my Aries qualities kind of show more in that aspect of my life. And then same thing with your moon. If your moon is kind of in like a very sensitive, like I have a water moon. So like I am more sensitive than people would expect based upon the other parts of my chart. Honestly, just know your sun, moon, and your rising and those houses, because that generally means like those houses might play a larger role in your life. Like I said, obviously everyone has the first house, which like makes a lot of sense. I have the ninth and the fourth. So the fourth for me is it's the parents' home foundation. So one of the things that Channy says about that is that I might be a support, like emotional support for a lot of people. There's also this aspect of like home and family. Like I like to build home like that. I was going to be an interior designer. So it kind of makes sense. So understanding the houses that your main like rising sun moon are in can be a really helpful starting point, because you can just be like, oh, that makes sense. So to answer everyone's questions, like your rising sign, check that as well as your sun sign, because that's like how you're perceived to the world. The houses, there are 12 of them. Don't try to memorize all of them. Like understand moon, rising, sun, and like figure out like what does that mean for those aspects of your life, and just know that those might play a larger role like in your
than most life. Right. So you ready for some Enneagram questions?
Please, because this is way more exciting for me.
People asked, how do you find out your wings, and how do you know if you have balanced wings? So the easiest way is if you're taking the Enneagram Institute quiz, so like, you took that, if, 7's at the top and 8 is your dead last one, you can pretty much guarantee yourself that you're not a 7 wing 8. You're not carrying any of the characteristics of an 8. Mm-hmm. If your wings are pretty close in score, you know that you're carrying similar characteristics. And you don't have to like do this only based on a quiz. Obviously, if you're reading about these types and you really read with one versus another, pretty much how I tell people to tell, either like from the results of your quiz, if they're very different, if one wing is towards the top and one is towards the bottom, it's like pretty clear if you're gonna have a wing.
Right.
Otherwise, if it's not clear and you pull from both sides, like for your example, for you pull from both 6s and 8s, like you resonated with a lot in both of those types.
Also, what I have to say, like the quiz was good and it got like very instant gratification, but I also am realizing that everything you read about the what do you call them? The types? Yeah, the types.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you read about the types is the average.
Correct.
So, and I feel like in any situation that I've been doing this in, I feel like I'm like the healthier. So like reading the encyclopedia and going through it that way and understanding, because like a lot of it, and you've said this before, is about like childhood. Mm-hmm. Like everything kind of comes back to like what was rooted in you in childhood. And that's when I was like 7. That makes sense.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have known that if I'd had that encyclopedia, if I hadn't had that.
Right.
So if you're here's my recommendation as someone who like flip-flopped and didn't know what the hell to do. Like that encyclopedia was so invaluable, because it started to make so much more sense. And I told Jamie, I was like, I'm feeling very understood. And she was like, and that is how you're supposed to feel. And I was like, okay, but I wouldn't have felt this by just doing a quiz online. So
you won't. And like, you won't. Some people are able to find their type by just doing a quiz and then kind of, seeing that type and reading up on it. But I never recommend just taking the results of a quiz and being like, this is my type. You need to read up on it. And basically, as soon as you feel seen or you're like, ooh, I don't like that, that's probably your type. A lot of people generally don't like their types. Like
I don't like the nasty side of set. Like it gets gnarly. Like 7s are addicts and very, very impulsive. And I feel like when I get unhealthy, I'm kind of impulsive.
I had a bunch of questions that were, if my partner won't take the quiz, how can I know their type? So there's a couple ways. I don't necessarily recommend this way, but I actually already knew Ben's type. He had taken it before I ever gotten involved in the Enneagram, which is great because he never would have otherwise.
Right.
Sometimes it just will jump out at you. If Ben had never taken it, I would have known he was a 5. It wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
But you can take the quiz as you think your significant other would like answer. I've done that before for people. It doesn't, I mean, obviously it doesn't always work, but like you can kind of get a sense of like where they might fall.
Yeah.
The other way is if you know your type on the Enneagram Institute, it has relationship pairings. So if you go, and so for Ben and I, like if I, thought, oh, maybe he's a 5, you can go to relationship with 2 and a 5 and read about what that relationship looks like. And they're pretty spot on if you know yours. So if you read all the ones with your type, you can kind of figure it out that way because you'll read that and you'll be like, oh, this is what that relationship sounds like. Someone asked, how accurate do you think the pairing descriptions are for the Enneagram? And I think the way that they describe the relationships are very accurate. I don't think that necessarily means like 2 and 5, they call the Enneagram double opposites, and we're married. So like, it's not like it's telling you.
It doesn't preclude you from having a relationship with that type. Right.
Right. And like, there's obviously more common pairings. There's pairings that they say are really strong, but they actually don't ever go so far as to say like, this relationship couldn't work, because the whole point of the Enneagram is like to grow as a person.
Yeah.
So there isn't a point where they're like, oh yeah, if you're a 2 and your partner is a 5, like don't get married. So my favorite question that I got was, I am a 2, but I wish I were less of a 2. Is it possible to switch types? Which is such a fucking amazing question.
Was this my friend Rupa? Because she literally.
Oh, it might have been. It was someone I didn't know.
She was like, I hate that I'm a 2. Why do I have to be a 2? It was so funny.
And that's how you know you have found the right type, is when you're like, fuck this. Like, this is the worst.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that are 1s that really hate being 1s because they're kind of, they're labeled as perfectionists and very black and white. And so a lot of people that are 1s like do not like it.
Yeah.
But the answer is no. You can't switch types. It is like who you are to your core. It's not like you can kind of grow into another type. Right. But you can always become a healthier version of your type. And like, healthy versions of any of the types are fucking great. Like,
I have a question actually, now that you're saying this.
Yeah.
So when you say the healthy version of a type versus the type you go to in health, how do those interact?
So it's a combo of both. So you have, 7s go to
5.
Is 5 in health? Yeah. Okay. So 7s go to 5 in health. So if you go to the Enneagram type for us, like the page for a 7, it'll have levels 1 through 9 of your health. So a really healthy 7 is going to be at levels 2 and 3. 1, 2, and 3 is very healthy. 4, 5, and 6 is average. 7, 8, and 9 is really unhealthy. Like, I don't know that many that are in the 7, 8, 9 area.
Yeah.
So you would look at levels 2 and 3, maybe 1. 1 is like the epitome of your type, and also of a 5. Those qualities combined is kind of where you are. Like, obviously you're gonna embody the 7's qualities of being healthy, but you're also gonna embody the qualities of a 5. And then when you're in stress, you're gonna go down to like the levels 5 and 6 of a 7, but you will also go to the levels 5 and 6 of a 1, which is where 7s go in stress.
Yes.
So I think that was like really, I got a bunch of the same questions over and over again. And something someone suggested, which I'm going to start next episode, I think, is instead of questions, at least for a little while, doing a deep dive into each type. So like starting next episode, I'll talk about type 1. So you can kind of get an overview of like what a type 1 is, some attributes, where they go in health, where they go in stress, maybe some like potential really good pairings, just like a general overview of type 1. So I'm going to do that as the episodes continue with each type.
I love that idea. I was actually thinking not something totally similar, but I'm wondering if people can send me even like DMs or emails with like, here, like I can pull a chart, and if they have a question about their chart,
Ooh, I like
kind of like try to it helps me too, as I'm kind of learning all these things. But if they're like, oh, like my question would be like, why, like, You drive so much conflict in love sometimes. And I could be like, okay, well, your Venus is here and this is why. So it could be kind of interesting to like.
Yeah, I love that.
To
Well,
do
and then
that.
also
So
I was going to say the questions that if I were to answer questions in that, I would ask that type ones give me questions about being a type one, like why they do X, Y, and Z. I think do
grab like
little deep
quotes.
dives.
Yeah.
That's
really
sort of
cool.
my plan. Okay, since we've
Talk
been talking
about
for
books.
1 million hours, let's go
I
to
know,
our
1 million. Sorry, that was me. I'm very like I feel like I haven't been social. Like, and this is me being social, by the way, which is also really sad, but I haven't been like social.
You've been moving.
Yes, I feel like I've come out of a cave and I don't even know. Like I've emerged into this sunlight.
I love it. I'm glad. It's nice to see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what was your favorite from October?
I couldn't even remember what I read in October, so we'll start there. I read a lot, but nothing was amazing. Like I wouldn't say I was like I am in a reading slump, but I'm not in a slump, if that makes any sense. I just kind of read some like pretty like.
Right, you're just kind of there.
Yeah, so I guess what I would say was my favorite was The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. Yeah, I really liked it. It kind of was like an eco thriller.
Right, the best way to describe it.
Right, which is how someone on Bookstagram described it. So I really liked that. That was kind of interesting and new. I also read, you know me, I love historical fiction. I've had this, I think I got it as a part of I don't remember which box it was. It might have been page one. Page one might have sent me this, which I never had heard of it, called The Guest Book. And it's basically about an American family in America during World War II. And kind of like, they're like a wealthy family, talks about kind of like their dealings with Germany, like all these kind of interesting things.
Love that.
And I thought it wasn't light in subject matter, but it was just like a little bit easier of a read.
Right, an easier read.
Yeah, so that was nice for me, and I enjoyed that, I guess. So that's kind of where I'm at.
That was nice for you. So my favorite was also my previous pre-order. My favorite from October was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is like obviously taking Bookstagram by storm.
Right, and I haven't read it yet, and I also pre-ordered it. It's on my fucking stack.
It's so good. It's the way they described it was genre-bending historical fantasy, which is so cool. And it's like, in my opinion, the exact correct way to describe it. It's a little bit longer, which I actually liked for this because you didn't really want it to end.
Okay, yeah, it's a bigger book.
Yeah, and the font isn't that big. So like it's a pretty big book.
Nice.
And I really liked it. And I thought the ending was perfect. I was like kind of worried that the ending was going to be like, meh. Okay. The ending was great. So favorite.
And you like the
October.
Fantasy element? Because I know you're not like, typically like that big of a fantasy reader.
It wasn't like obviously the story. Like
it was like a magical realism. Is that like a fair way to describe it instead of fantasy? Okay.
Correct. Yes. That's exactly how I would describe it. Yeah. Because it's not like it's not fantasy in the way that,
like world
Harry
building
Potter.
And yeah.
Right. Not the same. But yeah, I loved it. It was great. So everyone read
wonderful.
it.
I know. Maybe I need to read that next. So
it's a good break.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I agree.
Maybe I will read that next.
You had a lot of previous pre-orders, or maybe two.
No, yeah, I did. And I haven't read this one, They Never Learn, but I did read Leave the World Behind, which I know you also did. Yeah, I read it. I haven't reviewed it yet on Bookstagram because I'm behind 3 reviews and I don't even know what my own name is. So I know you didn't like this one.
It's not my fave.
I knew going in that it was definitely going to be literary fiction. And so when I pick up a literary fiction, I'm like, okay, what is the depth to this? Because there's something that's not supposed to. So for a literary fiction, I am going to say that it had, for being a pretty character-driven novel, it had a plot. Like there was something going on that we were like trying to figure out and shore up. And I kind of liked, I mean, again, this was not my favorite book that I read, but like I appreciated it for what it was. I kind of liked that, like it was a page turner in the sense that I was like, what the hell is happening? Like I need to know what's going on. And then you kind of it's kind of bitter when you're like, oh, they're not going to tell me what happens. They're not going to give, but then you kind of come to this realization that it's not about that at all.
You're not supposed to, You're not supposed to give a shit about that.
Yeah. That's not really what it's about. It's very much analyzing how people are behaving in a given situation.
Well, so I was talking to someone about it and she said the same thing. She was like, you got to pick who you are in a stressful situation. And I was like, fuck, I'm the worst person. I'm Amanda,
I know.
who was the worst. And I was like, cool. Like, is that what that means? Cool. Great.
I know. And I'm definitely the person that's like, if we stay home, we're safe. We're safe here. Like, we're good. Anyway, so I enjoyed it. I think I'm struggling, and I think a lot of people are with the election and everything that's been happening. Like, I have hardly read a page. Like, it's a thing. So I finished reading. Actually, it was a few weeks ago, but I started kind of feeling that itch where I was like, I don't know that I can read and focus. So it was a little bit harder for me. I had to like really dig deep to get through it because it is very much literary fiction, and it is not supposed to be this like plot heavy novel by any means.
Right. At all.
Good.
So we have the same pre-orders.
Oh yeah.
We have the same. So I already got this.
I had to, oh my God. And that delivered to my old address. So I have to go pick it up.
So obviously I know everyone's watching on video. This is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, which I pre-ordered like 6 months ago. And I'm so excited to read it. So that was one of the pre-orders. And then of course, Barack Obama's book, which comes out next week.
I know. I'm very excited about that.
I'm going to also get it on audio and do immersive reading.
Me too. I'm totally going to immersive read it. 100%.
It's gonna. I've never done that before, but I feel like this is the time. 33 hours of Barack Obama talking.
I know.
I'm good with that.
You can just like lounge and oh my God.
It's going to be great. The book is 750 pages, so it is not going to be a casual read.
No, it's not going to be casual at all.
The last book that I pre-ordered, actually, I don't think we've talked about, did you ever read Ready Player One?
Mm-mm.
Ben and I'm not an audiobook person, but Ben and I listened to it on a road trip like a few years ago, and it was so good. It was like, it's set in the, I don't know if it's actually set in the 80s, but it's about an 80s video game.
Okay.
That's like a VR game where you like go into the world.
Okay.
I don't even like really know how to explain it, but it was so good. And I like actually really
is it supposed to be like historical fiction, or is it totally like kind of like sci-fi, like
sci-fi fantasy-ish?
Oh, interesting.
And they made it into a movie which was complete garbage, like nothing like the book.
Oh yeah,
which
I've never heard of it.
Saddest.
Yeah.
So there's a sequel, Ready Player 2, and it comes out in like 2 weeks.
Oh, are you stoked?
So I'm very stoked.
Is this going to be the first one you actually read though and not listen to? I wonder how different it's going to be.
Yes.
Maybe I'll curious about that
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a copy of Ready Player One just because I wanted it for my bookshelf, but like, I didn't. Like, I never.
I should.
read it.
I'm gonna write that down because that kind of sounds fun and
different.
different.
It's really fun.
Ready Player. Remind me of that because I don't have a pen.
Yeah. I really, really liked it. I do wonder how it would read on the page versus audio, but like I know it's a very widely beloved book, so I imagine on the page was just fine. It was such an interesting story and a very visual story just because you're picturing this video game. There's in the video game. Yeah. For a lot of the novel. So hearing it on audio was kind of cool because you're picturing what they're describing to you.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it translates when you read it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's better when you read it sometimes.
Right. So we'll see. So that's the last book that I pre-ordered for November.
Yeah, I didn't order anything else. My TBR is gnarly, for lack of a better word.
I mean, mine's gross also. It's really bad. It's really bad.
You know what? A lot of it is like a lot of nonfiction, which is great.
Which is heavy. So you're like, yeah.
Right. But they're just going to sit. I feel like they're just going to sit on my shelves for so long because I can't do more. Like I used to be able to read like a couple a month and like have it be fine, but I feel like I'm reading heavier nonfiction. So I'm just like, it's a little bit difficult.
I'm looking at mine right now. A lot of mine is nonfiction also. I have a lot of, I have a
Actually,
huge
that's
TBR.
Something to say. Did I read last month? Did I read I'm Still Here? Was that this last month?
I think it was like the last day of September. I remember looking at it to see if it was like,
yeah, because that was so good. Speaking of nonfiction.
And it's short.
Good.
So like you can just devour it.
Yeah, it was like the best. I think I wrote in my review of it. It's by Austin Channing Brown, but it was the best like handful of pages that I've been immersed into like work culture, like being a Black woman at work.
Ooh.
Like it was like there were a handful of pages where it was literally like 7 a.m. And it was like I, tried to make a white person not feel bad for like it literally is like if you read only like the so I highly recommend. It's really quick, but
I have it.
You should. It's a really good one. Speaking of nonfiction, it was like one of those ones I was like, I haven't read from this stack in a really long time. Like, let me pick something up, and it was like the perfect one to do because it was like pretty easy.
Well, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back. I don't know if we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming in December, or it'll come out more mid-December again.
Right. We have to figure that out. The holidays are weird. Everyone stay on that note. Everyone stay safe and healthy.
Please be smart about what you're doing for the holidays. You know, it is blowing up in the Midwest, COVID. I'm not going home to see my family. If you look at the heat map on the New York Times, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois are just dark red. I mean, it is just exploded. So please, please, please be safe, be careful, social distance, wear a mask.
The end is near. The end is near. Use that carrot of a vaccine coming as like, this is worth it. This is worth it. You'll be able to see your families next year, fingers like more safely.
Right.
That's what because I too, I might be canceling Thanksgiving. My mom was supposed to stay and now I'm just like, I can't. We were supposed to quarantine, but it was like a 6-day quarantine. I'm like, fuck, unless we're doing 14, it doesn't make sense. Like I can't.
No one's life is worth eating a green bean casserole. Like, so let's just keep it in perspective.
Right. Just like make the green bean casserole yourself, you know,
or order it from Whole Foods,
or drown your feelings in pumpkin pie. I'm literally going to be eating pumpkin pie for every meal, I'm pretty sure. So
good. It's the best.
It's my favorite. Anyways, be safe, healthy. We'll see you guys or not see you guys. It's really awkward.
Bye.
On that note, peace.
Bye, guys.
Bye.